what we want to do is talk about the evolution of spatial thinking and really about, are we capable of answering or asking the right questions to get us those answers that we're looking for? So the session this afternoon started off by talking about intelligence amplification. So how does digital technology make humans more perceptive and more knowledgeable? And I want to take the question, everybody's got their smartphones, and do you believe this is making you smarter? Yes or no? Yes? No. Wow, okay. Well, that's a good answer. So I want to focus in on adding the word mobile mapping, because that's probably what I've got some qualifications to talk about. So when it comes to maps, digital maps, geographic information, how are these mobile devices making us smarter, or are they not making us smarter? So to answer this question, let's go back and think about and break this down into sort of three categories. How did we learn about geography? Because it all comes back to geography. As a small child, you go through a cognitive development process where you learn about place. You learn where you are. The next geographic skill you learn is about navigation. How do you get from home to school or wherever you're trying to go? The third step is patterns. The ability to recognize spatial patterns, to see spatial relationships. So these are the three sort of well-defined cognitive processes when it comes to geography. So we can translate that now to our mobile devices. You think about it. How do our mobile devices provide us information on place? Where are we? Through our GPS coordinates, what's around us? We're trying to find a local restaurant. Navigation. Navigation systems work really well on our mobile devices or in our vehicles. So those two are pretty easy to understand, but then take it to the third step. How well are these mobile devices helping us understand patterns? What's the pattern of crime in San Francisco that you're looking at? That starts to be a more puzzling problem. It's not as easy as just saying, where am I, or how do I get to a particular place? So one of the premises for this talk is about these mobile devices are actually causing a de-evolution of our spatial thinking. They're taking us backwards. In all the effort to make information so simple on your mobile device, is that causing you to go backwards in that spatial evolution of your thinking? Can you recognize spatial patterns? Can you think spatially anymore? Or are you so obsessed with just getting the quick answer of where's the local Thai restaurant that you forget about everything else that's going on? So I want you to think about that question, and in fact I want you to take a test, because how could you come to a university and not take a test, right? So here's your test. You and your colleagues, this whole room, I'll fly you to the United Kingdom, and you're going to go hiking in a place called Brecon Beacons Park. It's a national park, and one of you is going to get lost. So you're going to go off the trail, you're going to be lost. And how are the rest of you going to find this person? How are you going to establish the search and rescue probabilities and patterns and where you need to look for your lost colleague? So here's your mobile device, and here's the map you have. The last known position where your friend was seen was that yellow circle with a black X in the center of the map. And that person was headed towards the rendezvous point, the RP that's off to the southwest. Okay, so there's your map. That's your mobile device. Now you plan the search and rescue. Where are you going to find that lost hiker? Oh, I'm sorry, there's no cell coverage up here. So now what are you going to do? You can't text them, I'm sorry.
Do they also have the same?
They don't have a map, because they were using their mobile device, because the mobile device is the answer to all the world's problems, right? So now you've got to think. Where are you going to look for this person?
Is there a hub nearby?
It's the United Kingdom. There's a hub everywhere. You've got to find it.
At the bottom of the hill.
At the bottom of the hill. Okay? So you're a good Boy Scout, I'm assuming, or you learned somewhere in your orienteering that you head downhill, you follow the water course, and eventually it'll lead you to the pub. Right? Fair assumption. Okay, well, let's take a look at how this answer actually works. So these are the search and rescue probability surfaces that are created to do a real search and rescue in this area. And what it says, sort of in the simplest form, is that 50% of the people that are lost will be found within 3.1 kilometers. So you didn't even talk about how far out you needed to look. But there's very specific spatial constraints about how far a typical person will travel. Now, will they go uphill or downhill? So you said they're going to go downhill because that's what you learned. Well, 52% of the people will go downhill. but 32% are going to go uphill. Do you want to know why they're going uphill? Hello? Hello? So our simple mobile device that was supposed to amplify our intelligence is now making us look really stupid. We're climbing uphill, we're trying to get cell coverage going into areas where hypothermia is going to be a greater risk, but more and more people are starting to do that. 16% are actually lazy and just follow along the contour line, so they neither go up or down, but they're just sort of playing it safe. So all of that information starts to build these probability surfaces of where we can look for the person. You combine in other variables, like what direction they're headed. So they're going to most likely continue in the direction they were headed. So those are the pubs that we need to focus in on a little bit more. There's different types of land cover. Do you want to fight your way through scrub brush? Probably not. You want to stick to an open field. Or if it's an open forest, you may be able to do that. You're not going to be wanting to climb on rock outcrops. And you're going to be very likely to follow linear features, roads, transmission lines, drainage lines. Those are all going to be higher probabilities for somebody that's thinking spatially. And if you do follow those linear features, 95% of the time you'll be found within 424 meters of those linear features. You don't deviate too far from those. We can model how fast you'll travel across open terrain. And eventually what you'll get is the combined probability map that looks like this. So those red areas and the orange, those are the most likely places to find your colleague. The blue ones, less so. So what this really involved is modeling human behavior. It actually followed very nicely what IBM was talking about. They're not just simple questions that you have to answer, but it's actually modeling those complex questions, in this case, human behavior of how you're going to react when you're lost hiking in a forest or in the mountains or this national park. But there's only one little problem that we left off. Were you a normal hiker or were you a small kid with autism? Because those parameters change radically based upon who you are. If you're the autistic child, you're going to be traveling in a much smaller area. You're going to be probably found in a rock outcrop or a structure like a house where you're hiding because you don't even want to be found. So some interesting examples of if you're asking the right questions and thinking spatially, and has your spatial thinking de-evolved? Are you one of those people that uses your phone and starts going uphill looking for the cell coverage? So that's what I wanted to sort of talk about, is to get you thinking about these problems in the world, the valuable problems that need to be solved, are really some complex problems that require asking the right questions. When we're working in the consumer space, place and navigation, those ones are easy. And there's great solutions out there to do that. But even those can cause you to be stupid. And I'll give you my personal example with the Hertz Never Lost. I was on vacation back east, and I was driving from DC to Gettysburg. And I wanted to go up and see Gettysburg, so I did it. And I had a nav system, so I plugged in. And all I did for the hour or hour and a half I drove is it said, turn left, turn right. And I realized after I did that trip that I didn't even know what direction north was anymore. I had no clue how to go back and visit Gettysburg, and I was really stupid. I totally lost all context of what was around me. I didn't see anything other than the final destination because I never bothered to open my eyes and see what else was out there. So these mobile devices can actually make us, in my opinion, rather stupid if we're not careful. But on the professional knowledge side, the science side, the patterns, this is where the huge opportunity arises because these are where the hard problems that need to be solved. So I'm going to give you some more examples to just sort of test your ability to think spatially. This one's a little not too pretty, but this is a pedophile that was molesting young boys in Norway for 30 years. Okay? Here's the map that shows all of those incidents that were attributed to this particular suspect. So you've got 30 years of data, all the locations. Where do you think you're going to catch the bad guy? Well, you've got to be able to ask the right questions. So you can see some clusters around Oslo to the east and Bergen to the west. Those are going to be some clues, but you didn't think about space and time. I told you there was 30 years of data, and these patterns change in time. So asking the right questions involves breaking that data apart and saying, okay, if these are all the locations throughout the 30 years, well, let's look in yellow at the events prior to 1997. And you'll see those are clustered in Bergen and Oslo. What that means is those are the most likely locations where the suspect lives or works, because you typically get started as a criminal in areas that are close to home or areas you're familiar with. If you advance the time slice to 1998 to 2003, you'll see the pattern spreads out along the major roads. So now our suspect is mobile. And if you look at the last sequence up through 2004, you'll see a random pattern. This is after the nationwide manhunt began, and he was being very careful because everybody was looking out for him. So he created a random pattern of where those events were happening. So space and time also comes into play. What day does this particular suspect have off from work? If you look at the histogram of when he's committing crimes, Fridays and Saturdays are when this particular person didn't have to work. So all of those types of analyses, asking the right space and time questions, led to the apprehension of the suspect. And he was actually apprehended at a location that was about 3 kilometers from the initial center of where those events were happening. That's where he worked. So here's your next test. Everybody's an expert on site selection and market analysis for gas stations, right? Assuming you have a vehicle, you are an expert because you're a consumer and you know what you choose to pick the gas station. So here's a map of the south side of Denver. So it's just this from downtown Denver at the center, at the top of the map, all the way south. All those red dots are existing gas stations. You see your highway networks, your major roads, and some of the other features of South Denver. Where are you going to locate a new gas station?
Right turn.
Who said that?
So you don't have to turn left to get to it.
Okay, so you have a genius in your crowd, because everybody else will look at this map and say, well, we'll put it in the area where there are no gas stations. Or you're going to ask questions like, calculate the service areas of all the gas stations, look at average traffic daily, or average daily traffic, how many vehicles go past each intersection. But the real answer, if you were to ask the right question, is to model your behavior, which is most people get gas on their way to work or from work, and you always turn right. How many of you turn left to get gas? Raise your hand. Only if you're desperate. So a very small percentage of people will turn left because it's a matter of time and convenience. So you can model that behavior. That's the real spatial thinking. That's the real spatial patterns that you want to model. Here's one. Here is the social network of communications amongst them, a series of elephant families in Kenya on the slopes of Kilimanjaro. Each one of those circles represents an elephant family, and they have 2-letter alphanumeric codes. And the black lines indicate the number of social interactions, the elephants communicating with each other. So the social network diagram, and now let's assume you're Nike and you want to sell tennis shoes to an elephant. Okay? Which elephants do you target for your shoes? The ones with most connections, the white ones. The ones that have reach out and touch all the other elephant families, because those are the elephants that are interacting with everybody else. They're going to do the best marketing for you. Okay? You're not going to want to sell them to the yellow ones because they have strong bonds amongst their own families, but they rarely talk to those other elephants. You don't want to sell them at all to the red or orange NB family because they don't talk to anybody. Those are the social outcasts. But all that ties to geography as well, because where those interactions happen is a function of what's happening on the landscape, where the water, where the food, where those elephants live. The orange family lives all the way on the west side of Amboseli National Park, and there's very weak food. These are the weaker elephants, and they don't interact with anybody else. So asking the right questions if you were Nike and doing market analysis is about geography as well as things like social interactions. Here's an interesting one, Somali pirates. And this really gets to part of the heart of the problem of the de-evolution. With the advent of the internet, with the advent of web, with the advent of web mapping, people are putting dots on maps, millions and millions of dots on the map. But what problem does it solve? I can show you dozens and dozens of websites that show the locations of where pirates are attacking off the coast of Somalia. And everybody gets all excited about that. There's billions of dollars at risk, and people are coming up with solutions like that. That's not the solution. The solution is related to why are those pirates attacking when and where they do. And the answer has to do with wave heights. It's all about wave heights. Pirates are going out in little small skiffs, and they're trying to attack large ships, and if they capsize, they're done. So they do not go out in wave heights less than about 2 meters. That's the magic variable that takes months worth of spatial analysis to start to figure out. Once you know that, then what you can do is you can track all the ships around the world. You have access to real-time satellite information telling you the wave heights, and you can start to predict and warn ships that says, okay, we know where you are, we know you're traveling at a speed that's slow, it's going to be at risk due to pirate attacks, we know you're heavily loaded, and you've got a low freeboard, meaning it's real easy to jump on this ship, and now we can essentially ward off those ships or get them into protective custody in order to prevent them being captured. So that's the real part of spatial analysis, and asking the right questions is not just putting the dots on the map, but answering the question, why things are happening and what do we do about that? One last example, I think. A couple weeks ago, I ran into some Roman Catholic priests, and they said all I wanted was a map. They were monitoring and managing a series of citrus groves, oranges, grapefruits, and avocados in Southern California. They were interested in mapping on their mobile device to figure out where their water valves are, to turn off the sprinklers, the irrigation, and basically have a little bit more facility management knowledge of their Catholic retreat. But what it turned out into is what they really needed to do is better manage those citrus groves. So it's very quickly turned into a precision agricultural problem, where you can see the orange groves, and then as soon as you start looking at some of this high-resolution multispectral imagery, you can start to see the patterns about where the groves are producing higher yields than other yields. And that was really the heart of the problem of what they needed to answer. So I'm going to leave you with this last thought that says, don't think of it as de-evolution. Don't think of it as just answering or asking the right questions, but think of this as your evolutionary opportunity. The opportunity with spatial information is to solve the real problems, to ask the right questions, to think spatially, to bring in the science and the knowledge, and then, and only then, is it to think about putting that information on your consumer device, making sure that it's not just dots on a map, that it's the answers to the problems that need to be solved. Thank you.
A couple of quick but smart questions for John here. Oh, come on, you're still looking first north.
John, you can be able to stay for the dessert
Yes,
session.
yeah, I'll be around.
So yeah, the opportunity to sit with people and talk to them.
So how does this kind of thinking generalize to mapping things that are not geographic?
How does this thinking generalize to mapping things that are not geographic? Like what?
Human body, sites of disease.
Human body is geography. It's a different scale of geography, but it's very much a geographic relationship. I would probably say about 90% of information out there has a geographic relationship to it, maybe a little bit different than you're used to thinking. There are some examples that are not geographic, so it's not the answer to everything. But if that spatial relationship, the spatial geography, may be important, then that's when this type of mapping technology does come into play.